Oh, sorry.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Okay, so let's continue. Apologies for the slight delay, technical fault. Let's continue from where we left off. Last week we left off on the 6th ayah in Surah Al Fatihah. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. Let's continue from there. If we look at the breakdown of Surah Al Fatihah, we notice that the first three verses, that's after Bismillah, they are all praises of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these verses are exclusive to Allah Almighty. Then the last three verses that we move to إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين, and then اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. These are verses that are for the insan. So these are verses pertaining to the human. If we go into the very first verse, اهدنا الصراط المستقيم, the word, this is the fi'l, the verb ihdina, which comes from, or the masdar of it is hidayah. Hidayah is guidance. There's two types of hidayah. Okay, there is the hidayah which is in Arabic known as ad-dalala, and the second one is known as at-tawfiq. I will explain. Okay, so so you have al-hidayah, which generally means guidance. Okay, there's two types of guidance. There is at-tawfiq, and there is ad-dalala. Okay, I don't know how to translate at-tawfiq. That's a difficult word to translate. But effectively, what the two mean is, the first one, ad-dalala, is guidance that Allah gives each person. Dalala, He gives him the knowledge, or He gives him the understanding, or the ability to then understand what is Islam. So the person is guided in the right direction, is guided with a little bit of knowledge, and then the person learns and develops, and you get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second type of guidance is the tawfiq, and this is the guidance Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts in the heart. So you could do as much as you want. Okay, you can educate someone as much as you want on Islam. If the tawfiq is not there, the hidayah is not there, he will not become a Muslim. Okay, prime example of that is the uncle of the Prophet ﷺ. Okay, so he had the dalala, all the knowledge was there. He was his nephew. He was giving him all the signs, giving him all the indications of Allah and the final day. But what he didn't have was tawfiq. It wasn't written for him to be guided. Okay. So this is what we find, that hidayah consists of two things, ad-dalala wa tawfiq. Okay? So we're going to build upon that in a few moments. Let's move forward. So moving away from the hidayah, we'll come back to that in a second. Then we look at as-sirat. Okay? As-sirat literally means a wide path, at-tariq al-wasi'. So a wide path. And mustaqim means straight. So the first thing we can understand just from this very verse, اهدنا الصراط المستقيم, is that all mankind is in need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's guidance. Without Allah's tawfiq, without Allah's blessing, without His knowledge that He's given us, we will never find any hidayah, we will not find any guidance. So the first thing we extract out of this is that man is dependent upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for all of his guidance, for the knowledge that he has, for everything that he is dependent upon Allah Almighty. Okay. Furthermore, when we're talking about hidayah, the guidance it has for it asbab, which means reasons. So in order for a person to achieve this hidayah, he has to go out and take the means. Okay, it's very similar to like tawakkul. If you have hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the tawakkul you have in Allah, it depends on taking the means as well. So for example, if somebody wants to be guided, somebody wants to come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if they just remain indoors, they don't seek knowledge, they don't do much effort, they're not going to attain that knowledge. So you have to take the asbab. So the same thing with the concept of tawakkul, having dependency upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you don't take the means, the asbab first and foremost, then you will not attain the true tawakkul. It's like the example of somebody who's driving down the motorway, or he's going on a journey and he doesn't make preparations for his car to check if his car is safe, his car is adequate to take the journey, and he just goes and he says, this is tawakkul, I depend upon Allah. This is not the correct understanding. The same thing with the hidayah, is that you cannot just sit at home and not put any effort in trying to seek knowledge. Okay, talib al-ilm, this is why you are here, that you are seeking the knowledge. The more you go, these are the asbab for the hidayah, the reasons or the causes that will give you this guidance, the hidayah. So the more effort you put in, the more guidance you will get. So you can understand that a person who has very limited knowledge, or he doesn't seek knowledge, his understanding or his hidayah will be very, very little as well. But a person who dedicates themselves to the service of Islam, reads books, listens to lectures, attends lectures, so on and so forth, you will find that they are more guided because they are more informed about the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the hidayah is dependent upon the asbab, what means you take to get to this guidance. And those means are primarily knowledge, okay? How you get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the exact opposite as well, that a person, when he abstains from knowledge or continues in ma'asi, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also distanced that person away from him as well. As he said in Surah Al Fatihah, verse number 5, فَلَمَّا زَاغُوا أَزَاغَ اللَّهُ قُلُوبَهُم. That as they were disobedient and as they committed sins, أَزَاغَ اللَّهُ قُلُوبَهُم. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made their hearts harder. Okay, so they moved further and further away. So we can see that the causes of guidance is doing good deeds, and at the same time the knowledge. Furthermore, we can also see from this اهدنا الصراط المستقيم that there is evidence in this that the deen is wasi', because we said sirat means something which is all encompassing, it's a wide path. So when we look at this and we look at the message of Islam, we find that Islam is not just talking about the ibadat, it's not just talking about how to worship or how to make wudu or how to fast, but it's an all-encompassing religion. It encompasses everything that we have in our life. So the deen includes matters of ibadat, the deen includes matters of economics, or matters of politics, matters of spirituality. It includes every single thing, and we take that from the word sirat al-mustaqim, that it's a sirat, it's a wide path, it's a path for us in our life, it's a way of life. So that's the other lesson that we can take out of Surah Al-Mustaqim, that it's all encompassing of all matters. Furthermore, we can also, when we say ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim, or Allah guide us on the straight path, by default the opposite of that would be that there is a crooked path. Okay, so one can understand that life is full of different paths. So the sirat al-mustaqim, we are asking Allah to keep us on the straight path and protect us from the bent or the crooked path. So we can see that also, from an usul point of view, usul al-fiqh, those who study that, this is known as mafhum al-mukhalafa, where you understand the opposite by looking at what's present. So when Allah says, ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim, we say, oh, Allah guide us on the straight path, that necessitates that there are other paths which are crooked. The Prophet ﷺ, once he drew a line, straight line, and from this straight line he drew off other shorter lines. And he said that this straight line, this is the Surat al-Mustaqim, this is Islam. It's a long straight path, okay? And then on the straight line, there were smaller lines coming off. These are the shortcuts that people take. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, at the end of each one of these lines is a shaitan waiting for them. So the path of Islam is a long path, okay? It's a straight path. And there's no shortcuts. At the end, one takes a shortcut or thinks there are alternative paths, and the Prophet said at the end of each of these paths is a shaitan. Okay. And the next point from this ayah, ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim, that we also conclude that guidance is purely in the hands of Allah Almighty. We find in the Quran, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is addressing the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I'm going to pose a question, hopefully if you understood what's on the board, you'll be able to understand this question, that Allah Almighty, when he was talking about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, وَإِنَّكَ لَتَهْدِي إِلَى صِرَاطٍ مُسْتَقِيمٍ, that verily, O Muhammad, you are the one who guides to the straight path. You got that? That's in Surah Shura, verse 52. Okay? وَإِنَّكَ لَتَهْدِي إِلَى صِرَاطٍ مُسْتَقِيمٍ. Verily, Muhammad, you guide to the straight path. Then in Qasas 56, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّكَ لَا تَهْدِي مَنْ أَحْبَبْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يَهْدِي مَنْ يَشَاءُ وَهُوَ أَعْلَمُ بِالْمُهْتَدِينَ. In Surah Qasas, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, إِنَّكَ, O Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, لَا تَهْدِي مَنْ أَحْبَبْتَ. You do not guide those who you love. And this was directly after the death of his uncle. So, you do not guide those who you love. How do we reconcile between these two verses? One ayah, Allah is saying, Surah Qasas, verse 56. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in one ayah is saying, O Muhammad, you are the one who guides to the right path. In another verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, O Muhammad, you cannot guide those who you love. Isn't that a contradiction? How do we reconcile? Who can put things together?
So one's the role that Muhammad plays in bringing people to understanding the deen. And that's guiding the first one. The second one is it's not in his hands whether the person he's guiding will be given like shown straight. Oh,
very good.
Jannah.
Very good. It's effectively this, that the first ayah falls under dalala, that O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you have the ability to guide people with knowledge to Islam. But the tawfiq, whether they're going to accept it or not, is in Allah's control. Okay, so very similar to us. Okay, as humans, we can go to people, and we've got plenty of experience with our families, with our friends. We can go to them and preach them about Islam all day and night. Some of them accept it at the end of the day, and some of them all their life they resisted to it throughout their whole life. Because you've done your best, but the tawfiq is in Allah's control. Okay, so this is the understanding of the ayah, and it's important to understand that because many Orientalists may come to you and try to confuse you and say there's a contradiction in the Quran.
Which, do you know the two verses?
Yeah, so the first verse was in Surah Shura, verse 52. Okay, and the second was Qasas 56. Okay, if we continue, then الصراط الذين أنعمت عليهم, so the path which you have أنعمت عليهم, that you have blessed the people with. Now, who are these people that have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's blessing? We can summarize this up in very short. In Surah An-Nisa, verse 69, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us who are these people that have the ni'mah of Allah. He says, وَمَنْ يُطِعِ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ فَأُولَٰئِكَ مَعَ الَّذِينَ أَنْعَمَ اللَّهُ. So Allah says, these are the people that He has given them the ni'mah. عليهم من النبيين. So number one is the prophets. وَالصِّدِّيقِينَ, those who are righteous, speak the truth. Number three, الشُّهَدَاء, those who died in the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَالصَّالِحِينَ, those who lived an upright life. وَحَسْنَ أُولَٰئِكَ الرَّفِيقَ, and all of these are good companions to one another in the hereafter. So there, if you want to know who is أَنْعَمْتَ عَلَيْهِمْ, they're the four categories of people. Allah says أَنْعَمَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِمْ, that they are the ones Allah has blessed. If we continue and then look at the other two categories, غَيْرِ الْمَغْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا الضَّالِينَ. So not the path, al-maghdub, which comes from ghadab, which means anger. The maghdub is the people who Allah's anger is upon them. عليهم ولا الضالين, and those who have gone astray. So we've got three categories of people. You've got the first category who Allah has blessed. You've got the second category that Allah is angry with, and you've got the third category which is dal. Okay, those who went astray. The Tafseer, if you look in Ibn Kathir, when explaining these verses, they conclude that the maghdub alayhim, those who have earned the anger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, are Bani Israel. Okay, the Qawm Bani Israel, they're maghdub alayhim. We will talk why they're maghdub alayhim. And then the final, wala dalin, those who have gone astray are the Nasara. Okay, those they are the Christians. Okay. All right. This also teaches us that when we look at this الصراط الذين أنعمت عليهم, we looked at those we said are the four categories we said. But if we want to know more about those that Allah has sent His blessings upon, then we really need to study the lives of good people. Okay, so we can truly understand what is that path. And the best book to study, or the best topic to study about the best of people, is the life of the best of mankind. And who is that? Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we should all invest in seerah and try to study his life. Okay, and then when you study his life, then you can truly understand what it is that we have to live up to. Okay, so when we say an'amta alayhim, those that Allah has blessed, we need to study their lives as well. Okay, so after you study the life of the Prophet ﷺ, who else should you study the life of? Other prophets. If you read or listened to the lives of all the other prophets, what do you move on to next? Huh?
The
The companions, okay, the Sahaba. So you can see how there's lots of lives to read. Okay, so you'll be very busy just reading about their lives. Good. Also, we understand from الصراط الذين أنعمت عليهم, from this ayah أنعمت عليهم, here the ni'mah, the biggest of ni'mah that we can take from this ayah is the ni'mah of al-Islam. There are many ni'mas that we have in our lives, from our health to our wealth to our families to our children to all these things, and these are blessings that we are grateful to Allah for giving us. But the biggest of ni'mah, okay, is the ni'mah of al-Islam. Okay, and this is what is referred to here in this verse, the ni'mah of al-Islam. اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي ورضيت لكم الإسلام دينا. That we have completed for you this deen, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is happy with it, and His al-Islam. So the very fact that you have Islam, this is the greatest gift that Allah could have given you. Okay, so then if we look at the غير المغضوب عليهم الضالين and look at the maghdub, we say لأنه يستحق الغضب, because these people, they deserve the anger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They istakbaru, they showed pride and arrogance towards the messengers, towards the message that was given to them. Now, and we can also see in Surah Yusuf, verse 111, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَقَدْ كَانَ فِي قَصَصِهِمْ عِبْرَةٌ لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. If you look in Surah Yusuf, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, in the stories of Bani Israel, if you read their lives, there is ibrah, there are great lessons لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ, for those who understand their stories, and how they treated the prophets, okay, how they were responsible for the killing of prophets, how they were responsible for distorting the true message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And most importantly, and this is what we can really connect with as Muslims, is the fact that they had knowledge, but what did they do with that knowledge? They didn't, they hid it. They didn't act according to that knowledge, which is very relevant for Muslims today, okay? Where we just put our thumbs on verses and hide them and pretend they don't exist. So even so the knowledge that we have, it's incumbent upon us to implement that to the best of our abilities, and not become like Bani Israel, who are given verses and they change the message. Okay, so that's the primary reason why they're maghdub, okay, because they change the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's very relevant for us in this day and age. So why do we also, on that note, why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then refer to the Nasara as الضالين? Why are they the ones who went astray? Easy question. Why were the Christians then said that they were not maghdub, but they were dal, they were astray? Why were they given the title of being astray? Yeah.
Because once they were the people of Allah, but then they started changing it as well.
Yeah, they went astray. It's not the fact that the Christians changed the book, or they killed the prophets and so on and so forth. They changed the religion, meaning they made Isa alayhi salam into a prophet. Okay, and they started to worship him as God. So they went astray. That's the primary reason. Whereas the Yahud, they never worshipped Jesus, they never accepted him in the first place, but they changed the text, okay, and intentionally changed the text. So it was a different scenario. That's why they had the anger of Allah, whereas the Nasara, they went astray. Okay, they weren't understanding of what Allah wanted of them. Which one of the two is worse, the maghdub or the dal? They're both mushriks, but which one's worse? The one who has Allah's anger, or the one who went astray? The one who's got Allah's anger. Yeah, that's at the top of the list in terms of disobedience, because they didn't just hide the text. But when you read the stories, and I mean this is a dars in and of itself, is that they killed the prophets. And they didn't just kill the prophets, but if you read through their books, they also insulted them and accused them of fawahish, okay? Like which people would call their own prophets adulterous and committing incest and all that kind of stuff. So that's why they were called maghdub. They just completely went the other way.
But then they commit shirk, essentially.
Of course, they both Christians and the Jews will commit shirk.
So they're both astray.
They both astray.
One has the appellation of anger.
Yeah, so Allah explicitly said that His anger is upon them. Okay. Okay, there's another good point is that when we're talking about dalal, so the ghadab, if the anger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala necessitates that you are open to Allah's punishment. But if someone is dal, if someone is astray, does that always عليهم? So the path on which you have an'amta alayhim, that you have blessed, this path is also the path of the prophets. And the prophets, they received revelation through angels. So therefore we also get another pillar of iman, which is the malaika. Okay? So الصراط الذين أنعمت عليهم, we get another pillar of iman from there. Another pillar of iman, al-iman bil-qadr. Okay? Al-iman bil-qadr, we can extract that out of Rabbil Alameen, that Allah is the master of the universe. He knows what happened, what is happening, and what will happen. So this shows us also the element of qadr. Okay? You just have a look at that. There's some guy based on this. Okay. Okay. So that brings us to the end of Al Fatihah, inshallah ta'ala. Now we're going to look at Al Fatihah, but we're going to look at it from a different angle. We're going to look at the rules pertaining to Al Fatihah. So if you can put down in your books the title, Al Ahkam, so rulings pertaining to Al Fatihah. Okay, so we're going to get a little bit technical, so stay with me. Some of the surahs in the Quran, they consist of ahkam, meaning rulings. And some surahs, they're just stories. Like we said, the Quran breaks down into three major or broad categories. What were the three that we said? A third of the Quran is stories. Okay, stories of the prophets. Okay, that's a third. Another third of the Quran is
legal.
Huh?
Legal matters.
Yeah, legal matters, ahkam, rulings. And another third is aqidah. Okay, belief in the hereafter. So the Quran breaks down into three main categories. So stories of prophets, of righteous people, or even of bad people, stories. And then you've got aqidah, matters pertaining to akhirah, to the grave, and so on and so forth. And the last third is ahkam. Okay? And really, the crux of the matter comes down to the ahkam, because this is really where the sharia is based. That any system of law, it comes down to the ahkam. So this is really what is our deen. The first question, or the first hukum that we come to, okay, the first hukum we come to is هل البسملة آية من القرآن? Is the Bismillah Rahman Rahim, is this a verse of the Quran? So that's the first, so write that down if you can. Okay, so write that down if you can. So the first hukum we're going to look at is the Basmallah an ayah from the Quran? Okay, now there are three opinions to this. Okay, are you okay with me speaking, or do you want me to put things on the board? You can speak. Okay. You represent everyone. So, al-hukm bil-basmallah.
Put it on the board.
On the board, okay. So ladies, everyone, you've been vetoed. Alright. So the first hukm is the basmallah. So I'll do it. Basmallah. Okay. So is it part of the Quran? That's the first thing we need to understand. Okay, and under that we've got three understandings of whether the Basmallah is part of the Quran or not. The first of those, okay, is the opinion of let's go the other way. The first of those is the opinion of Imam Al-Shafi'i, okay, who says it is a verse of the Quran, a verse from the Quran, okay, and it's an ayah from Fatiha. So the first ayah of Fatiha is Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. There's no disagreement from all schools of thought that the Basmallah is an ayah from the Quran, in the sense that it comes in the ayah innahu min Sulaiman wa innahu bismillahir rahmanir rahim. So this is a verse in the Quran, in Surah Al-Naml, which is clear cut. It's part of the. But when you look in between the surahs, when you have Bismillah which comes in between surahs, or the Bismillah at the beginning of Al-Fatihah, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, is this Bismillah part of each surah, or is it there just as a division? is it part of Fatiha or is it just a way of dividing up the surah? So this is the question. So Imam al-Shafi'i, okay, one of the four major schools, Imam al-Shafi'i said the Bismillah is part of every single surah. Okay, that the very first ayah in every single surah is Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, except for one surah in the Quran which doesn't have Bismillah. Which one is that? At-Tawbah. Okay, so that's the opinion of Imam al-Shafi'i. And then the second opinion, okay, which is the opinion of Imam Malik, he says the exact opposite. He says the Bismillah, apart from Surah Al-Naml, is not part of the Quran. Okay? The third opinion is the opinion of Imam Abu Hanifa. Okay, Imam Abu Hanifa, what he says is هي آية تامة في القرآن أنزلت لفصل بين الصور. So he says it's an ayah which has been revealed, okay, and it's used to divide up the different surahs. So you know you're moving from one surah to another. Okay, so the Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim is wahi, okay, and it's used to divide up the surahs. And he says it's not an ayah from Al Fatihah. Okay, it's not an ayah from Al Fatihah. So the three positions. Imam Shafi'i says the Bismillah is the beginning of every single surah. Imam Malik says no, it's not part of any surah. And Imam Hanifa takes the middle ground where he says that it's wahi, meaning it's Quran, but then it's used to differentiate between different surahs, and it's not part of Al Fatihah. Okay? And it's not part of Al Fatihah. Now the discussion to why each one have said that is a long discussion. Each one of them has very strong evidences suggesting and explaining their positions. Okay? Do you want to get into the debate, or you just want to know the answer?
The answer. Yeah.
Okay. Now, for example, Imam Shafi'i, one of his evidences, Hadith Abu Hurairah and Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, إذا قرأتم الحمد لله رب العالمين فاقرأوا بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. That in one hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, if you read Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, and we know one of the names of Al-Fatiha is Alhamd, if you read it, he said, فَقْرَأُوا بِسْمِ اللَّهِ الرَّحْمَنِ الرَّحِيمِ. So read Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So he interpreted that hadith to mean that the Bismillah is part of Al-Fatiha. Whereas others said no, that when it said فَقْرَأُوا means it's not part of Fatiha, but it's from the etiquettes that you begin with the Fatiha. So it's the understanding of the hadith. Also, the Malikis who said it's not, their evidence, Hadith Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha قالت كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يفتتح الصلاة بالتكبير, that the Prophet used to open his prayer with the takbir, والقراءة, and he used to start reading Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen straight away. Okay, so that's also from the evidences of the Malikiyah. So, and obviously there's long discussions on who is right and who is wrong. Then the Hanafis, they come with their evidence and they say رأوا أن كتابتها في المصحف يدل على أنها قرآن. They said the very fact that it's inside the Quran and the Sahabas approved and the Prophet approved and they read it in that way proves that it's part of the Quran. Otherwise it wouldn't be in there. If it was something that was human endeavor, it wouldn't be in the Quran. So Imam Hanifa says everything in the Mus'haf from beginning to end is all wahi. So it is part of the Holy Quran. But he says it's used to differentiate between the surahs. Okay, is that clear?
Yeah.
Okay. There is no right or wrong answer. Yeah, you depending on which principles that you follow, which methodology that you're accustomed to. So different parts of the world, they follow Imam Shafi'i. Northern Africa, they follow Imam Malik, so they'll do that. And then you find the subcontinent, they'll be following Imam Hanifa. But the reason to why I'm doing this is to show you that these are opinions and they're legitimate opinions out there in the Ummah. So you might come across someone who will say Fatiha is part of Bismillah is part of Fatiha, or it's not. Now you understand that both positions are valid. Okay, so opening your mind to understanding that both those positions are valid. Okay, so that's the first thing we're talking about. The second one, so حكم الثاني, the second discussion is about ما هو حكم قراءة البسملة في الصلاة. Now this one should be fairly easy. What's the ruling of reading the Basmallah in the prayer? Okay, so if you're now going to pray and say Allahu Akbar and you start praying, do you have to say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim and then Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen Maliki? Do you have to say it? This is the question. And then the other question would be as well, if you're the Imam, yeah, and you're reading out loud, do you have to start with Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, or do you just go straight into Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen? So it has an impact. The answer to that question is going to be very similar to this here. So, for example, the Shafi'is, they say that the Bismillah is part of Al-Fatihah, so you have to read it. So it's a must in your prayer that you read it. Whereas Imam Malik and Imam Abu Hanifa say you don't have to. They say you should, it's sunnah to do so, but you don't have to. So if you miss it, then your prayer is valid. Because there's another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, لا صلاة لمن لم يقرأ فاتحة الكتاب. We're going to come to that in a moment. That there is no prayer for the one who doesn't read Al-Fatihah. There is no prayer for the one who doesn't read Al-Fatihah. Now here, if you say that the Bismillah is part of Al-Fatihah and then you don't read the Bismillah, did you read Al-Fatihah? No. And if you didn't read Al-Fatihah, is your prayer valid? No. So you see how it's connected. So that's the reason why. So the Shafi'is, they say the Bismillah is part of the Fatihah, so you must read it. So if you go to Egypt, for example, and you go to most of the masajid in Egypt, you'll find that the Imam will start with very loud, he'll start with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillah, because the Shafi'is. So that will be, so you are aware to why they do that. Whereas if you go to northern Africa or you go to Pakistan, you won't hear somebody read out the Bismillah loud. Okay?
Are they reading it quietly to themselves?
Yeah, so we're coming to that now, okay? So, for example, Imam, in this scenario, we know that Imam Shafi'i said you must, so that's an easy read. And Imam Malik, he would say that you don't have to read it. لا في افتتاح القرآن ولا في غيرها من السور. You don't read it, so you find the Malikis won't read it. Whereas the Hanafis, what they will say is that يقرأها سرا مع الفاتحة, that he reads it quietly. Okay, so even if you're the Imam and you're leading the prayer, you read the Bismillah, but you don't read it aloud. You just say quietly, and then you move into the Alhamd.
So I have a question. So if you're reading more than one surah in the Salah, in that case, you would have to say Bismillah
to differentiate between, yeah. And they're all in agreement of that. Yeah, as to differentiate. Okay. Okay, good. Okay, so that's the difference. That's the only major discussion there. That the Fatiha for the Shafis is a must. Yeah. So this is why sometimes you can also have slight intolerance when it comes to madhahib and schools of thought. So if you have what happens if the Imam is a Maliki? Okay, he's come from Algeria, he's come from Morocco, and he's leading the prayer. And the people behind him are Egyptians, and they follow Imam Shafi. And the Imam starts off the prayer, and he says, Allahu Akbar, and he just starts off, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, and he didn't start with the Bismillah. If you're an Egyptian, what are you going to do? Are you going to walk out? Because you're going to say, my prayer is not valid. No, this is the point. This is also another big topic which we'll discuss inshallah. It's called Adab al-Ikhtilaf, the manners of differing. If the difference is a valid difference, as you can see here, it's a valid difference, you cannot impose your thought on another person. Because they both have evidences, or all three of them have evidences. So you cannot impose yourself on another. And in that case, you respect the difference for the greater unity of the Muslims. Okay? So in this case, where there is a valid ikhtilaf, yeah, you will undergo your whatever your opinion and follow the person. Okay? So that's a very important point to understand when it comes to differences that are valid. Yeah.
So where does the brother Ali Hadith stand?
You'd have to be a little bit more specific. Who we talking about? Generally speaking,
sorry, those who do not follow the Imams.
From what I understand is only the Shafi'is believe that the Fatiha, okay, the Basmallah is part of Al-Fatiha. They're the only ones. Everyone else says it's Sunnah, it's a recommended thing to read. So I haven't come across anybody else who says it's obligatory, except for the Shafi'is. Okay, let's move over to the third hukm. Okay, the third hukm that we get out of Fatiha is هل تجب قراءة الفاتحة في الصلاة. Now this is an important one. Okay, and I need to draw this on the board. Do we have to read Al-Fatiha in the prayer? Okay, now I will test your, those who've been with me for some time. So the hadith of the Prophet is لا صلاة لمن لم يقرأ الكتاب. There's quite a few hadith, that's why. The Fatihah الكتاب.
When you say pray, you mean Jama'ah?
1 second. Okay, so there is the hadith, yeah, for the non-Arabic speakers. I'll break it down. So, la means nahi, yeah, so I'm going to say that as no because there's a big discussion. Salah is obvious. Liman for the person, lam yaqra, he did not read, okay, بفاتحة الكتاب, which is Surah Al Fatihah. Okay, now here's the hadith, and we have to understand what is being said. There are two interpretations to this hadith. لا صلاة لمن لم يقرأ بفاتحة الكتاب. What do you initially understand from that? If you were to say that, read that hadith at face value, what do you understand from that?
You did not recite.
Okay, so one interpretation is that if you did not recite, okay, Al-Fatiha, what happens? Your prayer, okay, your prayer is not accepted. There's another interpretation. Yeah.
Maybe if you didn't read it out loud.
Close. The reason is here we have in Arabic we have hadf. There is something missing. In English they call it the ellipsis. There is a word here which is missing. Okay, and it fits in here. Something is missing here. There's something implied, and the thing that's being implied is what the scholars differed upon. Ever think?
Allowed.
Not really, because if you're praying Asr, for example,
Obligatory?
okay, so the two options, okay, so the first one is, let's go to start with that, is Kamila. So this is one of the opinions. They say, La solata kamila liman lam yaqra fatil kitab. That there is no complete prayer for the one who doesn't read the Fatiha, which means that his prayer is accepted, okay, but it's deficient, meaning he didn't get the full reward. So that was one, la salata kamila liman, because there's something missing here. The other group of people, they say the missing part is la salata, meaning nafi as-sihha, okay, which basically means that the la here means a rejection, that there is no prayer. So if you take this interpretation, it means the prayer, okay, the prayer is rejected. Okay, both of those meanings are valid. Okay, both of those meanings are valid. For example, if I said, or the Prophet said, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يكون أخيه أحب إليه من نفسه. Yeah, that a person doesn't believe, لا إيمان, that a person doesn't believe until he loves his brother or he loves for himself. Now, if I love myself more than I love Umar, for example, does that mean I have no iman?
No.
But it's the same construct. لا يؤمن, you do not believe, okay? Until you love your brother, you love for your brother, you love for yourself. لا يؤمن. Now, does this mean I love myself more than I love Umar? Does that mean now I'm not Muslim? What does it mean?
Deficient.
My iman is deficient. My iman is deficient. Same construct. La salata liman lam yaqra bi fatil kitab. That here, what the la is referring to is deficiency. That your prayer is deficient if you don't read the Fatiha. The other interpretation is the more direct one, is that there is no prayer if you don't read the Fatiha. That's the direct one, without any interpretation. Show of hands, who feels comfortable with the first one? That if you don't read the Fatiha, your prayer is invalid. With the show of hands. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so
Is that in different cases though?
Like,
One is behind reading, behind the imam.
no, forget
one
that.
is-
Just your
Well,
prayer.
this is your own personal.
Your own prayer, yeah. Yeah, so where did you?
Yeah.
Okay, so most of you were with the first one. Okay, who's the second one? That if you don't read Fatiha, your prayer is valid, but you lose a lot of ajr. One person. mashallah. Two.
Yeah.
No, I thought you were going to back him. Okay, so one person. Okay, let me tell you, this position, the first one, is the position of the majority of the scholars. Imam Malik, Imam Shafi, Imam Ahmed, the vast majority of scholars, they took this position. The second position was the you don't get the full reward. Both interpretations are also valid. Okay, so that's also important to understand. That's why this also becomes apparent when you're reading, for example, Surah Al Janazah. Surah Al Janazah, if you read the way the Hanafis teach Surah Al Janazah, there's no Fatiha inside the prayer. Yeah, there's no Fatiha in Surah Al Janazah inside the prayer of the Hanafis. The others, the Malikis, the Shafis, the first thing they read after the Isti'anah is Al Fatiha, because every prayer, according to this, must consist of Fatiha. Otherwise, there's no prayer. So it becomes apparent in other things. Yeah, but again, what's important to understand is the difference, okay, and the tolerance towards one another. So if somebody comes and, for example, he is a Hanafi and he reads the Janazah, and you're not Hanafi and he's the Imam, don't lose the plot. Just calm down. It's acceptable. Okay, both positions are acceptable because they're based on knowledge. They're not based on whims and desires. So that's also something that we have to understand.
Sorry,
Okay.
how is it acceptable? Sorry, you first. How is it acceptable when his clear cuts says Fatihah and we have he's going to do for Fatihah? How is it acceptable?
It's a valid interpretation. That's why there are ikhtilafat of two. There is ikhtilaf sa'ir, which means it's something which is acceptable. We can discuss it. You have an interpretation. There is ikhtilaf ghayru sa'ir, which is an interpretation which is invalid. We don't give it any weight. We don't listen to it. We throw it out the window. Okay. Like the beginning of the course, we looked at some of the tafsir, yeah, and we told some of the crazy people how they interpret some of the verses of the Quran. Those type of ikhtilafat, they're rejected, they're thrown out the window. We don't even discuss them. But like I said, when the Prophet said, "La yu'minu ahadukum hatta yakuna akhi ahabba ilayhi," that his brother is more beloved to him than himself, it doesn't mean that because I love myself more than I love another brother that I'm not a Muslim anymore. So the Hanafis have weight in the argument. Yeah. So therefore, there are legitimate differences. Okay, the fourth hukm. Are we ready for the fourth one? الحكم الرابع هل يقرأ المأموم خلف الإمام. Now, if the ma'mum, the person who's, we come to now, what you guys raised, if you're praying behind the imam, okay, what do you do now? Do you read your Fatiha aloud? Do you read it or do you not read it?
No.
Yeah, three choices. Yeah, so someone said we read it, some said we don't read it. Yeah, so this is the difference. So the Shafi'is and Imam Ahmed, he said إلى وجوب قراءة الفاتحة خلف الإمام سواء كان صلاة سرية أو جهرية. So the Shafi'is and Imam Ahmed, they said you must read the Fatiha. You must, even behind the Imam, you must read it. But the thing is, you read it quietly. So even if you're praying Dhuhr or Asr, whether you don't hear the Imam read, you still read it, but you read it to yourself. Okay, you can either read it in your heart or you can read it so quietly that only you can hear it. Okay, but you must read it. The Malikis, they said that if it's a quiet prayer, like Dhuhr and Asr, okay, in this case you read it to yourself, quietly. But if it's Fajr or Maghrib or Isha, you don't do anything, just listen. Okay, you don't do anything, you just listen. Okay, why? Because they base it on إذا قرئ القرآن فاستمعوا له وأنصتوا لعلكم ترحمون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, if the Quran is being read, فاستمعوا له, then listen to it. وأنصتوا لعلكم ترحمون, and pay attention to it. Maybe Allah will descend His mercy upon you. So they take the generality of the ayah and they say no, the Imam is reciting, so we don't. Now the Hanafis, they come with an alternative position and they say that you do not read it at all. Okay, whether it's in a loud prayer or a quiet prayer. So the loud prayer, the Imam is reading it. Okay, so they say you don't need to read it. They say the ayah, if the Quran is being recited, then do not recite over his voice, just listen. But then what happens in the Dhuhr and the Asr prayer, they take the same position. Like even in the Dhuhr and Asr prayer, the Imam is reading, but he's reading quiet, you don't need to read it, you just stand there. Okay, that's the position they took. Okay, so those are the three positions. And the latter position of the Hanafis, many of the modern Hanafis, they disagree with this opinion. They say that no, in the quiet prayers, you still read it, but you read it quietly. But the official position of the Hanafi madhab is that you don't read it, you just stay quiet. Okay?
But read your own surah.
No, you don't read the surah.
You read nothing then, or
Yeah, you just.
estimate when the Fatiha finishes?
I don't know. That's a good question. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. Okay. Yeah. So those are the three positions when it comes to
Is the door open?
yeah, there's someone there. Okay. What do you want to just have a last one? That's because they have English classes, so they come for English classes. Okay, so let's continue now. Alhamdulillah, we finished Al Fatihah. Let's continue in the next 10 minutes that we have. Yeah. Yeah, very good. That's a good question. So, many of the position of the Shafi'is, the ones who say that you must read Al-Fatiha, if you go to Yemen or Egypt or things like that, when the Imam finishes, الضالين, he stays quiet for about 1 minute. He stays quiet. Why? He gives you the chance to read Fatiha. Okay? So you read it yourself. So if you ever go there, you'll hear the Imam is quiet and everyone behind him is they're reading the Fatiha. Okay? Whereas in Pakistan, or if you go Turkey or Hanafi country, as soon as the الضالين, Alif Lam Mim, go straight away. Okay? So that's the difference. Why? Because the Imam is giving them time to read the Fatiha, because they believe they have to read it. Okay? So that's a good question.
Sorry, who disagreed with Imam Abu Hanifa? Any of the students?
On the issue of
Reading the Surah Al Fatihah quietly in the Zohar and Asr?
the latter Hanafis, so not the early Hanafis, the latter Hanafis. So the Hanafis of the last 100, 200 years. So they said that the reading of staying completely silent is not correct.
Do you have any name in your head of the person who?
I can find it for you.
Right. Okay.
Inshallah. Okay. Any other questions before we move into the next surah? We got time? Yeah. Yeah.
Do the people that interpret the la at the beginning of the saying, do they interpret it as deficit for other sayings as well?
Yeah. Yeah. So many times this is why I use the hadith that لا يؤمن أحدكم, that you do not believe until you love your brother what you love for yourself. So this is another example of the usage of la, but in the second sense, not in the first sense, which is clear. No one disagrees with that. There's no one who says that if you love yourself more than you love your brother, that you're not Muslim. So that's why that's unanimous. So that's why it's a very strong evidence for them. But nevertheless, the Jumhur, the majority, they said, and this is the principle in usul jurisprudence, that you cannot move away from the apparent unless you have clear-cut evidence to go to either like the metaphorical or an alternative meaning. If the apparent text is clear-cut, there's no need to move to other interpretations. Yeah, but obviously their interpretation is still strong because it's backed by another hadith. The principle is backed by another hadith. Okay, so that's the
my question from last week. You know when you can join the prayer in ruku and the rak'ah will count, but then you're not reading Surah Al Fatihah for that.
Yeah. So here the Prophet ﷺ, said that the salah or the recitation of the Imam is the recitation of the ma'mum, of the one behind him. So if you join him later, then you continue prayer from where he left off, but his Fatiha will suffice for you. Okay, so if you just join him and he just finished his Fatiha and he's reading a surah now, for example, and you missed the Fatiha, his Fatiha will suffice for you.
But wouldn't that then state that you don't really need to read behind the Imam?
Is that another proof for those people of that opinion?
Possibly, yeah. Yeah, that's another alternative, yeah. So if you, for example, join in the ruku', you don't miss it, but you actually join the ruku', you've actually made that rak'ah, haven't you? And you now actually didn't read the Fatiha. So that could be another evidence used for the Hanafi position.
Because I'm interested, if you're praying behind the Imam and someone walks past you, it's fine as long as they don't break the Imam's prayer.
Yeah, that's right.
Because you're actually part of his prayer.
Yeah.
So then,
yeah. So that, the question here was about if you're reading in Jama'ah and somebody walks past you, you can do that, it's fine. You're allowed to walk past somebody in congregational prayer, but you just can't walk past the Imam. Okay, that's the only difference.
Is this an issue for that, going back to blind following?
Is that what, sorry?
Blind following. Like in terms of the clear cut, if it's, I've been told like if the hadith is weak, then you have to choose the stronger one.
Yeah, this is a good point. Omar raises a good point here that here when we're coming to the like understanding these positions now, okay, the speaker has to be very careful when he opens up his box because some people might not be able to handle it. Okay, so they'll be like, oh, they've got 3 opinions. Why there's 3 opinions? It's so confusing. It should be straightforward. There should be just one answer. Which one do I use? How do I know what's right? How do I know what's wrong? But you know, I feel that you're at a level where you can understand that. Now, which one do you choose? Here, I remember one of the sisters asked this question as well once before, that you can either take the safe option and just follow your school of thought. If you don't have the ability, the time, the research to look into why each person said what they said, just follow the school of thought that you're either born into or you follow your parents or you studied. So that's fine, okay? If your parents were Shafi'i and that's how you've been brought up, that's fine, it's not a problem, you can follow that. Because you don't have the ability or the skills to decide which opinion is stronger or weaker. But if you are a student of knowledge and you have the ability to go back and forth between these different evidences and you can understand where they're coming from, then you're in a position to take an alternative opinion. But the taking of the alternative opinion, I mean, this is my opinion by the way, so some will not agree with me, but the taking of the alternative opinion must be based on knowledge, not upon desire. So you can't go with Isa, for example, I can't read all these opinions, like, you know what, actually I'm going to go with the Hanafi opinion and just not read anything. The day is long and tight. No, that's not Islamic, that's not the way it works. You're going to read through all 3 opinions, understand the language, understand the argument, and if you thoroughly read through it and you're convinced that Imam Shafi'i is actually, you know, he's got some really strong points, and you're convinced, that's what you follow. And that's what Allah is going to ask you about, the one you're convinced with. Okay? Yes, please.
A couple of weeks ago you mentioned a hadith about Surah Al Fatihah split into 2, and the Basmallah wasn't included. Wouldn't that show that it's not included then as Surah Al Fatihah?
Yeah, so that's another discussion that they bring, that we said, one of the hadith, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he said that Al-Fatiha, نقسم الفاتحة بيني وبين عبدي, that the Fatiha is divided between me and my servant. And he said, when the servant says, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Hammadani, that when he says Alhamdulillah, he has praised me. So what verse did the hadith start with? It didn't start with Bismillah. So that's another evidence for those who said Bismillah is not part of, so it's a good point, that it's not part of the Fatiha. But then in other cases we find the Prophet started his prayer with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Okay? So that's why we say both of the positions are valid. Okay? Good question. Any other questions? Yep. I won't go into the next one. You can ask away.
What about A'udhu Billahi Minash Shaitanir Rajeem?
Okay, al-isti'adha, we took that last week, right?
We talked about it, but we didn't say.
Okay, we're doing it. So the isti'adha is basically, it's not an ayah from the Quran, but it is isti'adha that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructed that when you read the Quran, فَاسْتَعِذْ بِاللَّهِ, that you say the A'udhu Billahi Minash Shaitanir Rajeem. It's not a verse from the Quran, but it is the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ and an instruction from Allah that when you read the Quran, فَاسْتَعِذْ بِاللَّهِ, that you seek refuge in Allah from the whisper of shaitan.
So that's included in your prayer as well?
In your prayer as well, yeah. So reading of the isti'adha is a sunnah, it's not something, and all the people agree on that, it's not obligatory to read isti'adha in your prayer, it's a sunnah. Okay? So something recommended. So for example, if you didn't read the isti'adha in your prayer, it will not diminish your reward, but if you read it, you'll get more reward for it. Because the Prophet ﷺ would proceed his recitation with isti'adha. Any other questions? Yeah.
It's not really a question, it's just a thought really, just going back to reading the Surah Al Fatihah aloud, like starting out Islamic life as a hardcore Salafi type. You know, we always follow that you need to recite the Surah. Okay, and there's maybe 2 solutions. One is to recite just after the Imam as he's reciting. One is at the end. But now I find, this isn't a proof, but I don't know if you've got any thoughts. I find both things rather inelegant from the point of view. If you are reciting while the Imam's reciting, you know, you kind of, if you're going behind every ayah, okay, you're kind of overlapping with him, you know, not focusing. And if you're waiting to the end, even then, depending on how much time he's going to give you, you know, you're sort of speeding through.
So,
and then,
so what's been said is, how do you recite the Fatiha then if you have to recite it and the Imam's reciting? So there are 2 alternatives. The first is that as the Imam finishes the ayah, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, you say it. Alhamdulillah Rabbil. You can say it in your heart, or you can just say it on your lips, but quietly. Or the second option is you wait till he says الضالين آمين, and hopefully he'll give you enough time for you to read your Fatiha. If you go to a country like, say, like a Shafi'i place, you'll very easily be able to read your Fatiha after the Ameen. They give you a good time to read it. But here in this country, many places they don't really do that. Maybe Regent's Park, they give you some. But other than that, what you're going to do is recite ayah after ayah. So as the Imam, he says Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, you're going to have to just internally or slowly just read Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. There is no third alternative. Yeah. That's the way you'll fulfill the obligation of reciting Fatiha. Yeah.
What about Ameen at the end? Is that compulsory or?
Good question. I forgot about that. Ameen is part of the discussion. Yeah, remind me. Okay, we'll go into it in more detail next week. But the Ameen is just a response to the Dua, because the Dua is Al Fatihah. The whole of Fatihah is a Dua, and when you make a Dua at the end of it, you say what? Ameen. And what does Ameen mean? Yeah, it's for the Arabic students. Ameen is ism fi'l. Okay, then you're gonna ask what's ism fi'l. It's a noun that behaves like a verb. Okay, so Ameen basically means istajib. So Allah answer and accept our dua. Okay, so that's Ameen. Okay, that's the
mean like I agree. Or when someone say dua and you say Ameen, which means do you agree to what you say?
I haven't read the meaning I agree, but it means istajib, like Allah accept or respond to our dua. So when you say Ameen, and what we know is that the Prophet ﷺ said, if the Ameen, your Ameen corresponds with the Ameen of the angels, then what happens? Yeah, it's accepted. Okay, that's one of the reasons to why those who say you should say the Ameen out loud, because if your Ameen corresponds with the Ameen of the Malaika, your sins are forgiven, and the Fatiha, your du'as are accepted. Okay, but at the same time, there are those who say you don't need to say it out loud. Do you have to say Ameen? No, you don't. Okay, but it's sunnah to say that. Yeah.
You know, the last two verses he said it alludes to Bani Israel and the Christians. Is that our understanding, or is that the case? Because what about the other religions? Why are we not like fire worshippers and Hindus and stuff like that?
Okay, good question. Because the essence of al-Maghdub, the reason why Allah is angry with them, because it means that one time He was happy with them. He was happy with them. Okay, they were the chosen people. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala were chosen people. So they were people who were on the truth, and then they went astray, or they went away. But the Majus, the fire worshipper, or the one who worships a monkey or an elephant, he was never on guidance in the first place. So he's like pure mushrik. Okay, whereas the other two, they were from prophets. They're the lineage, Bani Israel. They're the lineage of prophet. So that's why they have the ghadab, or they have the concept of them straying, because they were on the path.
Because we say guidance to the Prophet.
So they were given everything to stay on the path, but then they went away. Okay. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask us a few moments. While you're thinking of your questions, also we're going to go now from Al Fatihah, and the reason why we chose Al Fatihah is because it's the most often read surah. We read it like 17 times a day. So that's why I wanted the people to have an understanding of Fatihah. What we're going to do now is go to the back of the Quran. Okay, we're going to go to the Juz Amma. Why? Because those are the next surahs that we very commonly read in our prayers as well. But we're not just going to go through Amma like as from An-Nas, working your way up. No, what we're going to do, inshallah, to make it more fruitful and understanding, is we're going to go through Juz Amma in order of revelation. Okay, which surah was revealed first, and then second, then third, then fourth in Juz Amma. Why? Because like I said at the beginning, it's very important that when you study Tafseer, many people when they study Tafseer, they just read it. Monotonously, just stop Baqarah and then Imran, just read it and Tafseer. But you're not living it. What you need to do when it comes to Tafseer is to live the Tafseer, meaning pretend, just imagine that you're with the Prophet ﷺ at every incident. So the very first surah that was revealed was Iqra, yeah? So Alaq, the first 5 verses. They were the first ones to be revealed. So we're going to start with that surah. And we're going to see the situation of how the Arabs, how the Quraysh, how the environment was, which led to the need of Iqra. Okay, so it will put things not just in tafsir perspective, but also seerah perspective. So you're going to get 2 things at once. So we're living the journey. So that's what we're going to do, inshallah, next week. We'll go into Alaq.
So you just go into the first few verses and then you'll go.
No, I'll do the whole of Alaq. Yeah. Even though the latter part of the few ayat they came later, but they're still connected to the theme of the first 5. Okay, Otherwise it'll be too much. If I go for each verse as it came.
No, so that's why it's a whole surah and not just the 5 verses of the surah.
Yeah.
Because there's still a connection.
There's a connection. But they came later.
Yeah.
Okay. So inshallah ta'ala next week we will do Surah Alaq. So if you want to prepare and read behind the surah, we do that. And then after Alaq will be Tabbat Yada Abi Lahab wa Tab. Okay. The verses of cursing of Allah. Any questions before we conclude? Yeah.
It's not really relevant to me because being a student, I have to go to school on Friday.
Yeah.
And I miss Jummah prayer. So instead I have to pray Dhuhr at school. I heard somewhere where the khutbah of the Jummah prayer makes up 2 of the rak'ahs of Dhuhr prayer. So if you don't read the khutbah, you have to pray 4 rak'ahs. Is that true?
No, that's not true. Okay. So the Jum'ah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He said in Surah Jum'ah, okay, He said, فَاسْعَوْا إِلَى ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. Hasten to the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Mufassirun, Ibn Abbas, if I'm correct, he said that the dhikr of Allah, this ayah which refers to dhikr of Allah, is talking about the khutbah. Okay, it's talking about the khutbah because that's where you mention Allah. So the Friday prayer that's obligatory upon the men is from the moment the mu'adhin makes the adhan all the way up until the moment the Imam he says is tasleem. That's the Jummah prayer. Okay. If you come late and you miss the khutbah, you just read the 2 rak'ah. If you come late and you miss 1 rak'ah and you only make the 2nd rak'ah, then you just make up 1 rak'ah and that's your Jummah. So you don't. The only time you're going to pray 4 is if you miss the whole Jummah. Okay.
Yeah, and then you pray on your own at school. There's no Imam starting the thing. It's just you pray.
Then you're praying Dhuhr.
Then you're praying Dhuhr.
Yeah, that's not Jummah. Because in order to have Jummah, you need a minimum of 3 people. So you need the Imam and 2 other people.
Yeah, we have like 4 people.
Yeah, that's fine. Then you've got Jummah. That's fine.
You don't need a
So you
khutbah.
just pray 2 hours.
No, you need a khutbah.
You need the khutbah.
Yeah.
If you don't have the khutbah,
Then you pray Dhuhr. But then you're contradicting yourself because if there's 4 of you, then why don't one of you just give the khutbah?
No, because we don't have time to do it. Otherwise, we miss the whole completely.
Yeah, well, you're going to have to do an extremely short khutbah, which is permissible. You're allowed to do that. You can do a very short khutbah, yeah. 2-3 minute khutbah. Okay, because the basics of the khutbah is just to have the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned, okay, send salam on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that's it, you start praying. So you could literally, in that case, you could do a khutbah in about 2 minutes, if you're in that situation. I don't see how it justifies you praying Dhuhr. Anyone else? Okay. Barakallahu feekum. Inshallah we'll stop there. Subhanakallah wa bihamdika. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Help yourselves to some tea and some halwa. There's loads there to eat. Continue to do it. Assalamu alaikum.